Remember last time, our two electric-powered buses had broke on it. Well, we just had one go down again today. So we have two, but I sent a message saying, you have to reserve for February 1st, the city of Encinitas. We have two of them, but they're like not experimental vehicles, but for some reason, the batteries just aren't lasting on these things. So, and then they're like, oh, it's convertible, it's this, and it's like, so they're great, they're working because they're quiet, clean. And it's $700,000 to buy it. I mean, it's not, it's expensive. No, I bought an EV last February. I've had it a year now, but it's a Chevy Bolt, so it's kind of like a, so it's great for around town and stuff. But like my mom, she lives in Seal Beach, which is kind of by Long Beach.
Yes.
And to go there, we can go, but we still have to charge to get home. We can't just go and come back.
We're experiencing some technical difficulties with the recording system, so we're going to have a start of this meeting a little later so that we can record the complete meeting. So I beg your forgiveness here, but we're going to be a few minutes late.
I think in a couple of years, so we'll be able to go far.
Karen, is there a special link or just say YouTube? Okay. Mayor, we'll probably start, but we can't use the system.
We can't use the,
Yeah, it's not loading. There's some kind of,
will the video be going?
they're going to have to watch it on YouTube. And then,
Watch it on YouTube?
yeah, and then the cable will be going out, but then we'll just have to take that cable feed and copy it into YouTube, into Granicus later.
So you're recording?
I'm not recording. You can go ahead and start.
But it's being recorded?
It's being recorded, yeah.
Okay. Good evening. I would like to call to order this regular meeting of the Encinitas City Council for Wednesday, January 24th, 2024, and we are starting at 6:03 p.m. We are experiencing some technical difficulties, but it is being the video is being recorded on our YouTube channel. It will eventually end up on our website like a normal video, but for now, we're gonna get started. The system isn't working 100%, but we'll be able to conduct the city's business, and we'll have a record. So,
Mayor, it is going now, so I'm just going to let everyone know it may be intermittent,
Okay.
that it pops on and off, so.
so we get instant updates. So we're called to order, and I would like to ask the clerk, please, to call the roll.
Councilmember Lyons,
Here.
Councilmember Ayers,
Here.
Councilmember Hensy,
Here?
Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
Here.
And Mayor Krantz.
Here.
Record will show that all members of the city council are present.
All right, and if you'd all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're starting this evening's meeting with a special presentation, and before I call up the recipients of that presentation, I wanted to share a quick story, personal story. 40 or so years ago, I was working for the Anchorage Times on their photography staff, and I was given an assignment to cover the 100,000th donor to the blood bank. And so I trudged on out through the snow to the blood bank and took a picture of the guy that got the 100,000th, made the 100,000 donation, and I decided, in spite of my fear of needles, I was going to become the 100,000th and first donor. And so with that, I learned I was a B positive blood type, which is 7% of people have B positive, and it's fairly useful for the blood bank. So I have since that time given several gallons of blood. I'm not as regular as I should be, but I do feel that it is important to give the gift of life, and that is what donating blood is doing. So when I realized it was Blood Donor Awareness Month, I wanted to take an opportunity to honor Mike Emerson for all the efforts that he makes here at the city to organize quarterly blood drives. So I would like to call Mike and his family up. And we have also two special guests. Rob Nauman is the Senior Blood Donor Recruitment Manager at the San Diego Blood Bank, and Mike Shayer is the Director of the San Diego Blood Bank. If you'd all come up now, I would appreciate that. And I'm going to let Mike introduces his family.
Thanks for honoring me. And this is my wife, Kim, my older sister, Kristen, Robert Newman with the blood bank, and Mike Shea. And this is my father, Bud Emerson, my niece, Katie Power, my mom, Mary Ann Emerson. Come on up here, Mom. And my brother-in-law, Steve Power.
Very good. And the other point of pride here is that many, many years ago, my father was Mike's PE teacher at Earl Warren Junior High. So it's a particular honor, yes. And so we have this proclamation here that I'm going to read. Whereas it is with great pride and admiration that the City of Encinitas recognizes individuals who demonstrate unwavering commitment to the betterment of our community. And whereas Mike Emerson has been a dedicated blood donor for an impressive 40 years, contributing to the health and well-being of countless individuals in need. And whereas since December 2010, Mike has served as the primary coordinator for the blood drives in the City of Encinitas, exhibiting exceptional leadership and organizational skills. And whereas under Mike's guidance, the City of Encinitas has hosted 68 blood drives, providing a total of 1,826 units of blood to local hospitals. And whereas the impact of these blood drives extends beyond numbers, as the City of Encinitas has played a crucial role in saving the lives of 5,478 people through the generous donations facilitated by Mike Emerson. And whereas the partnership between the City of Encinitas and the blood bank has spanned 2 decades, with the first drive taking place in April of 2003, marking the 20th anniversary of this invaluable collaboration. And now therefore be it resolved that I, Tony Kranz, Mayor of the City of Encinitas, along with all the City Council, express their deepest gratitude to Mike Emerson during National Blood Donor Month for his selfless dedication, leadership, and the significant impact he has made on the health and well-being of our community. Dated this 24th day of 24th day of January 2024.
Well, I'd like to thank my director, Sylvester Mabry, and my supervisor, Eric Steenbach, for allowing me to do this. And then also the great community that we have that actually does give blood, and they do it every 8 weeks, nonstop. And I'm so proud of this community for giving that blood. And this award is really for everybody in this community, and the proclamation, thank you.
Thank you. And on the note that he just added regarding the community, I also wanted to say that there are proclamations that we prepared for the other organizations in the city of Encinitas that have regular blood drives, and I'm going to read those to you here. The Magdalena Ecke YMCA does 10 to 12 drives per year. St. John's Catholic Church does 4 drives, also quarterly. San Diego Academy does 2 drives per year, and the Levenheim Municipal Water District does 4 drives per year. So they're all going to get proclamations. We're just not having them all here. We would have had a big crowd, and so I wanted to focus on Mike and his efforts.
Yay.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to oral communication. Madam Clerk, if you'd
Yes, we do.
call
We have
the
several.
speakers.
Just a reminder, oral communications is to speak on matters that are not listed on the agenda. When I call you, you will have 3 minutes to address the city council, and I'll call you 3 at a time. The first 3 speakers, Gary Murphy, Jennifer Hewitson, followed by Trina Priest.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Gary Murphy, 123 West Leucadia Boulevard. I wonder why I'm here. Okay, here's the deal. We had a rough day the other day. Public Works, they worked their worked their fannies off. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've had a lot of communication with Jill and Matt in engineering, and they're trying. I don't know what we can do here. It was 12 years ago, Tony, you stood in front of this council and you talked about drainage. And you asked Jerome to be transparent about the grand jury. And you also wanted to know why we were bringing water from the east side of the tracks to the west side of the tracks. We're still doing it. So I'm here tonight. I've got a letter in front of me. This is a letter to Mark DeLynn from Kip Hefner. Kip was one of the top engineers in Encinitas for 20 years. In the letter, he tells me I'm the most he tells Mark Delane that Gary Murphy is one of the most knowledgeable residents with Leucadia drainage. Kelly knows that. We spent many hours when she was head of L101. Tony, you and I went up and down with it 1,000,000 times. Bruce, I've spent a year with you. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I did that with Tony, too. Allison, sorry I haven't done it with you or with Joy. But tonight I'm here to request, just like you did 12 years ago, I want an open forum with you as the mayor, a debate on the drainage. It's the longest going project that hasn't been fixed. We can have a mediator, or we could just sit on it, but I want it to be on local television, and I want everybody to see it on Channel 19. And I want it to be you and me talking about interim things that were ignored, and to talk about big fixes. Big fixes are too expensive for us to do. Interim is what's going to get us through and keep people's houses from flooding. I want this forum, Tony. We've been friends for years. I know we have enough respect for each other, it won't get out of hand. Please, let's do it. give me a chance to sit down on Channel 19 or whatever local channel there is, and let's discuss everything about history to interim fixes to what we're going to do tomorrow. Houses should not flood. We've lost the same house 2 years in a row, and it was already in the lawsuit. We lost businesses this time. We had the Phoebe pump station shut down because of overloading, because it's connected to the 23, but it's been saying that it isn't. It is. And the point that it boils down to, Kelly, you got to see it firsthand. Your friend took a beating. I got to meet one of the girls that worked there. Nice place. I want the forum, Tony. I want it to be open to the public, and I want them to be able to see it on TV, the people that really care, and I want you and I to be adults and do it to where people understand the drainage really, and maybe we can get higher towns to give us a lot more money than what we have now. If you would do that with me, I'd surely appreciate it, and you'd make history as a mayor. Thank you.
Hello, Mayor, City Council, Jennifer Hewitson, Wotan Drive. I know there's some big expenses on the agenda tonight, and I'm going to add a couple to discuss. First, as Santa Fe Drive improvements begin, I know intentions are good, and I hope the kids walking and biking will be safer. However, with all the protected bike lanes, changes to the roadway, as well as recent and upcoming density development, we need the stormwater runoff plan and traffic impacts plan scrutinized and correctly designed, engineered, and implemented. Triple scrutiny is in order, considering what's going on in the city and all over San Diego County with the water. Within that project, we need the critical roundabout at the Crest Drive intersection put back into that budget and on the agenda soon. This is a blind hill at the top of Santa Fe where cars speed, drivers recklessly make illegal left turns from Crest into speeding traffic, and pedestrians have to run for their lives to get across. Please do not complete the east part of the Santa Fe project until the roundabout is back into the design. There's ample space for it, and the same kids that are down the hill need this to keep them safe. And that includes all the neighbors and drivers as well. Second, open space, open space, open space. A critical and fast disappearing resource and a main reason for out-of-control runoff. Stormwater runoff, this is another devil of density wake-up call. We need preserved open spaces, not designation of high-density development in flood-prone watershed areas, destruction of remaining riparian habitat and other open spaces. The state forces high-density housing onto cities, who in turn go along with inadequate planning, infrastructure, or careful review of the builder's bare minimum runoff management plans. Slack, dangerous, and abusive is what I'd call the latest plans for Encinitas. Until we have a plan and map out potential land to purchase and create incentives for builders to be able to donate portions of theirs for preservation, Encinitas should place a temporary moratorium on development. Time is running out to save our few remaining open spaces and to save our city from state mandates to destroy it. Thank you.
Trina Priest will be followed by Nicholas Harth and then Stacy Riddell.
Good evening, Mayor Krantz and Encinitas City Council. I am Trina Priest, a middle school teacher and a mother of 3 teens. Our family appreciates this city's policy of smoke-free public places and parked cars. Smoking and vaping behaviors affect everyone who is exposed, causing poor health, which costs money and affects our public health and medical resources. The recognition that secondhand smoke, whether tobacco or marijuana, has significant health risks has prompted several other cities to follow your example. This policy change has a positive effect on our environment as well. San Diego State professor Dr. Tom Novotny describes cigarette butts as a toxic waste that leach out chemicals, metals, and plastics into the marine environment. Beach cleanups worldwide have resulted in tobacco waste as the #1 item picked up. Another example of toxic waste are single-use vapes, which have batteries and become hazardous. As Dr. Novotny stated, quote, banning outdoor smoking, tobacco, and marijuana can reduce tobacco product waste and support a community non-smoking norm. Another significant marijuana and tobacco secondhand smoke policy is on the horizon: smoke-free multi-unit complexes and apartments. Access to safe, affordable, and stable housing is often a key requirement for good physical and mental health. Smoking in this shared housing, however, makes safe and stable housing difficult to achieve for all residents. Secondhand smoke exposure can lead to poor health, including asthma and other lung problems, particularly among pregnant women and children. It also affects those with chronic diseases such as cancer and heart disease, as well as diabetes. It would be wonderful if Encinitas led the way and reviewed the idea and literature regarding the value of smoke-free multi-unit complexes and apartments. Thank you for your consideration.
Nicholas Harth, followed by Stacy Riddell, and then Terry Skelly.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Nikki Harth. I am a Leucadia native and local business owner. I own both Surf House and Coffee down on the corner of 101 and Jasper Street. And I'm also the newest president of Leucadia 101 Main Street. I'm here today to talk about Leucadia drainage. As you all know and saw on Monday, our drainage system in Leucadia failed the residents and the businesses in a huge way, and it's not the first time it's happened. It's common knowledge around town that Leucadia drainage is terrible, that certain roads flood, water pools in specific parks and zones. Why is that just the accepted norm rather than working towards fixing it? Small businesses are getting affected that help create the community and culture that is Leucadia. It's these types of flooding events, if these flooding events keep happening, it's going to cause these businesses to not be able to stay on our historic 101 corridor, and we'll start to lose what makes Leucadia funky. I plead of you not to just work with engineering staff and planners to fix the Leucadia drainage situation, but come to the businesses and residents, speak to them and what they experience with every rainstorm. This last winter alone, I had countless sleepless nights running around Surf House in the alleys and the 101 with sandbags and diverting water to keep it from flowing off the streets and into our rooms. And there are other people more experienced than myself and knowledgeable and that have ideas that would help manage the flooding. I would also like to speak quickly about the Beacons beach access. We need to start moving towards a more permanent solution rather than just fixing the trail. We need to start talking about building stairs and a safer way to get people to the beach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Nikki is very tall. Okay. Thank you for having me. As many of you do know and some of you don't, I'm the new executive director for Leucadia 101 Main Street Association. So this is the first time I've ever even spoken at the pulpit here. And I am very upset and discouraged and concerned about our businesses after what happened on Monday. And I really appreciate all your support for our organization and our residents and our businesses. The city has been nothing but supportive of us as an organization, all we try to do for our constituents. But this recent storm on Monday flooded so many of our streets and severely impacted several small shops and restaurants, especially south of Leucadia Roadside Park, north to Phoebe Street. Obviously, there was a big problem that happened, and it's just something that needs to be fixed and mediated for our businesses. Impacted most by flooding, Mud House is basically destroyed. Coffee had some obvious flooding. Duckfoot's entire basement was flooded. Corner Frame Shop, Corner Pizza, Leucadia Floral, Child of Wild, Threadspun, and 4 Till 4 Coffee Shop. Now, that's a lot of businesses and restaurants on our small corridor. Some of the folks that were impacted were completely unprepared, such small mom and pop places like Heidi's. It's just awful. They were taken by surprise, and some of the long-term damage will yet to be seen or even known as far as environmental mediation and financial impact and viability and survival of some of these stores. In that moment of panic, we as an organization didn't know what to say or how best to help them other than grabbing buckets and towels and squeegees and trying to literally bucket the water out of their shops. For me, we've been doing our best to assure everybody that we're going to work with the city of Encinitas very closely to come up with a more permanent plan to mediate the drainage issues and to communicate on their behalf, and also my role to communicate what is happening in the city to our constituents. As we should, L101 is always going to get the first call in these types of situations, especially in emergency situations. That's our role as an organization, and we are proud and very capable of doing just that, being a conduit on the behalf of the city and for resources and for information, which is why I'm here tonight. The issue is timely. The rainy season is just getting started. We don't know what we're going to face this winter and even into spring. I want to make sure that L101 has the right answers and resources for our community in case of an emergency or extreme weather event like Monday's torrential downpours. We want to have a real plan in place in coordination with the city in case we have infrastructure failures like what happened in the Threadspun parking lot, as well as a more permanent solution in place. Please have someone from staff reach out to me so we can work together on this issue. I am so hoping we can get something done and talked about sooner than later. And any resources and tools that you have for my disposal that I can disseminate
Thank
to
you.
my constituents, I would really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Terry Skelly, followed by Mark Wilcox, and then Scott Campbell.
Good evening, Encinitas City Council, Mayor Krantz. My name is Terry Ann Skelly. Many of us who work as public health educators have been discussing the study recently published in the Lancet Psychiatry regarding the increase in the number of mental health patients who have cannabis use disorder. This often occurs when smoking, vaping, and consuming marijuana is daily. Those experiencing cannabis use disorder were more likely to attempt suicide and less likely to finish high school compared with teens who had never used. Adolescence is an especially risky time to smoke, vape, and consume marijuana because the adolescent brain is still developing well into early adulthood. During this period, neural connections within adolescents' brains are forming, getting reinforced, or being pruned. The highly concentrated THC marijuana products are essentially new drugs and profoundly affect teens and young adult brains and their daily functioning. As a parent of 3 young adult sons, I realized that males overall, and especially at the ages of 16 to 25 years old, are more at risk for cannabis use disorder. And now, more studies coming out weekly document the connection between cannabis use disorder and the development of the psychiatric disorder, schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a serious mental health condition that includes inappropriate actions and feelings, delusions, and withdrawal from reality and personal relationships that affect our family lives. Since we have 4 pot shops coming into Encinitas, a good code enforcement will be immeasurably important. There are Encinitas pop shops which have not yet received their State Department of Cannabis Control permit, yet their storefronts encourages vaping, smoking, and consumption of marijuana products through their signage and promotion, and this is not right. Thank you for hearing my concern this evening.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Mark Wilcox, followed by Scott Campbell, and then Peggy Walker.
Good evening, Council. My name is Mark Wilcox. I'm a father and grandfather, and I've shared these concerns about the youth of Encinitas at these City Council meetings and the role that City Council can have to protect and support them. I would like to share some thoughts from an article in The Atlantic written by Matthew Loftus, a family physician who also teaches. He wrote that public policy plays a role in shaping the environment so that we can develop our best selves. As he wrote, quote, "Just as highways have guardrails for the moments when a driver isn't exercising perfect self-control, so we also need guardrails to help people from driving off cliffs of bad decisions," end quote. Often opponents of these types of public policies make their case with idealistic situations. For example, shouldn't responsible, independent adults be able to make decisions for themselves about how they spend their money or use their body? However, focusing on these ideal cases and basing our laws on them disregards millions of people who suffer because of their addictions and it obscures the underhanded tactics of companies who make money off the misery of addicts. And it is these underhanded tactics that concern me. Parents like me feel that we are at an extreme disadvantage in pushing back on marijuana normalization, promotion, and advertising that happens when marijuana storefronts come to town. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Scott Campbell. I live in Encinitas District 1. And key word today is deferred. I'm going to talk about water, not just drainage. We're going to talk about water rates and 15% for 3 years straight, on top of previous rate increases. And no, I don't think we're going to get saved by drought rates. I don't think that's going to happen. And what are the odds of us actually getting this up to thing? We're going to use all the money that they requested, guaranteed. But why is that 12% is deferred? The mayor was chair of the board for 3 of the last 10 years. Didn't get the maintenance done. Okay, so let's talk about the sanitation districts. They're facing the same things. I think they're going to cost a lot more money. Same thing, deferred maintenance is now we're paying. We're going to pay more. Let's talk about drainage. A lot of people are talking about drainage. Again, deferred maintenance, and here we are today. Shout out to the Public Works Department. If you drove around today, you wouldn't even know there was a storm done. I mean, I don't know what the overtime pay and everything is worth it. All the machines that we got, rent it, whatever, is worth it. But let's talk about drainage a little bit more. Are you aware of uncontrolled water at the nice fancy Hotel Alea Maria, with a huge undermining of the sidewalk? And this has been going on for over a year. Are you aware of this? Mr. Emerson knows all about this. I invite you to talk to him about this. On streetscape, it's pretty unclear based on the budget what's going on, but was it a month ago, 2 months ago, members up here, my council member representative said that we got to do the streets first, streets before drainage. Is that still the prevailing view? If you read the capital budget, I mean, it's off topic a little bit, it's not clear what's going in first. Just 2 months ago, you said streets first. So can you please be clear on this? Some of this stuff is about the rule of law. The 2 closest restaurants to my house have been pending permits for some meager outside tables on their private property. And this was going on since last summer. This is tourist serving zoned. And yet you have all these street dining with expired permits and tons of permit violations. We're going to get around to all this stuff eventually. And they're permitted to stay open. What is the balance on this? I don't understand. Either everybody's good or everybody's bad. You can't have some favored places and some disfavored places that get enhanced response. Thank you, and please consider all these. I hope you took some notes. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Peggy Walker, San Diego Alliance for Drug-Free Youth. Because Encinitas is an environmentally conscious city, I know that you are familiar with cigarette butts littering beaches and public places. But now, environmental advocates like the CDC Foundation say single-use disposable vapes and e-cigs have become today's most detrimental hazardous waste product. You may not know that they are replacing traditional cigarettes as the most common pollutant on beaches, and they're littering streets, parks, and waterways. National data showed 12 million vapes, which are non-biodegradable, are sold per month and thrown out at an unsustainable rate of about 4.5 per second. This harms health and pollutes the environment. The EPA defines both vape plastic and liquids, whether tobacco or marijuana liquid, as acute hazardous waste. And they say vape plastic cannot be recycled with other plastics. It's different. Disposable vapes contain lithium-ion batteries, heated metal coils, toxic chemicals, and heavy metals that create what experts call one of the worst kinds of electronic waste. The lithium-ion batteries can corrode and leach toxic chemicals into waterways, harming water systems and endangering wildlife. More bad news is that environmental experts say we have no infrastructure to effectively recycle all e-waste, and possibly never will. They conclude it's not an option to keep selling and tossing disposable vapes and e-cigs. The only solution is to ban them. Dealing with vape waste is becoming extremely costly. And so I come to you tonight to suggest that you, as other cities are doing, consider the idea of banning vape and e-cigarette sales. Thank you.
Mayor, that does conclude oral communications. And just a reminder to the people watching at home, we are having some intermittent technical difficulties. So if you do find that the live stream goes out, you can always log on to YouTube, and the link is on our agendas and webcast page.
Okay, thank you. And a couple of follow-ups to the comments that we just heard. It certainly was heartbreaking to see the impacts of the most recent storm on businesses in Leucadia and others around town. It is one of the things that has happened is that a declaration of an emergency has been made by both the governor and the County Board of Supervisors. And on the city's website, at the top of the page, there's a link to the page at the county website that you can go and report damages that you experienced. And that would be true of private property, personal homes, as well as businesses. So please be sure you encourage people that experienced impacts, that had impacts, go to that website and fill that out so they can be contacted once the decisions are made about any potential help that comes from the emergency declarations. The other thing I wanted to let people know is that our last discussion about the streetscape was to approve a contract to the to have the next phase of streetscape built, and it included some stormwater facilities. And there was an extended conversation about what was going to be built at that time, and we didn't have all the answers that night. We I think owe it to both the council as well as the public a better explanation about what's going to be built in stormwater facilities will be built with this phase of streetscape. So on February 14th, we will have the item on the agenda for a public conversation about the stormwater facilities that will be built as part of this phase and those facilities that are in future phases. So it's going to be an important conversation, and I would encourage anyone that wants to have an opportunity to speak to the council and learn more about the project to, if not attend, watch that meeting. So thank you all to all the speakers tonight. And with that, we will move on to item number 6, which is a report from closed session. And with that, I'll ask the city attorney to provide that report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At approximately 4:04 p.m., the City Council recessed into closed session on the special closed session agenda. Councilmember Hinsey was not in attendance for any part of the closed session. The City Council recessed back out of the closed session at approximately 5:45 p.m. While in closed session, the City Council discussed 4 cases, all pending litigation cases. The first, Davis versus City of Encinitas. The second, Chavez versus City of Encinitas. And the third, Gates versus City of Encinitas, all under Government Code 54956.9, existing litigation, as well as Harbin versus City of Encinitas, Government Code 54956.9, a Workers' Compensation Appeals Board case. The City Council took no reportable action while in closed session. In addition, the 5th and 6th item listed on the closed session agenda were not discussed in closed session and were not heard. And that ends closed session report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the posted agenda, and then moving to the consent calendar, item 8E has been pulled by member of the public.
8D is in Delta?
E as in Edward.
Edward, 8E. Okay, so that's 8, that leaves 8A through 8D, followed by 8, nothing. 8A through D, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Pick one.
Who was this? Joy. And then since our system is not currently working, I'll just do a roll call vote. Councilmember Lyons?
Yes.
Councilmember Ehlers?
Yes.
Councilmember Hinsey?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell?
Yes.
Mayor Kranz?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. We'll move to item 8E, and that is Elena Thompson, and she did request a staff report.
Who pulled this?
Elena Thompson.
So do you want to come speak, or do you want to report first? Okay. Quick report, please.
Hi. So a quick summary of the Pacific View Site project, why we are increasing Conan Construction's contract amount is due to some available funding from the IT department. We were able to use some grant funding to install a broadcast room. So that was one change. There were some other unforeseen changes as well. The underground utilities, the water and the sewer differed from what we saw in the as-built, and so that required some changes in the field as we excavated the trenches. Getting a new main switchboard installed for the site to accommodate all of our state-of-the-art electrical-based systems was also costly. We had to pay SDG&E for the work to trench to restore new power to the site, and as well as satisfy SDG&E requirements so that the meter readers can access the new main switchboard. Is that sufficient?
Okay, that's Elena?
Thank you for clarifying that. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to make a public comment on the city budget, and I just thought that it was odd that an expense item of this magnitude, similar to other not-to-exceeds, would be placed on consent rather than on the city budget. So thank you for clarifying that. I know Sandag had a lot of cost overruns on a regular basis with contracts that were bid at one amount and then new things came up. So looking at our fiscal position, that's what I'm doing. Thank you.
Okay, I would move approval of this item.
Second.
I have a request to speak.
Councilmember Lyons?
Thank you. So I agree with Elena that it's important to be really good fiscal stewards of all of our expenses and all of our costs and all of our capital programs and investments. I thought that the agenda report could have been a little more detailed. When I read it, I wasn't clear on what was included. And so I did get the staff briefing to give me more information. And I apparently wasn't the only one who wasn't clear on it. So I just want to kind of reflect that to staff. Was there also the security system included in this contract modification?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
And I think that up on the board is our last vote.
I was going to say, wow, I'm voting fast in here.
Yes. I apologize for these setbacks. Councilmember Lyons?
Yes.
Councilmember Ehlers?
Yes.
Councilmember Hinsey?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell?
Yes.
Mayor Kranz?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. You're going to see this vote pop up at some point as well.
Okay, thank you. So we are now on to item 10A, which is the presentation of the city's annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023. So last year it ended in June at the end of the month, and this is the comprehensive financial report of that fiscal year.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. This item will be presented by the city's auditor, Shannon Ayala of Davis Farr.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, Mayor, members of the City Council. As Teresa mentioned, I'm here to report on the audit for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023. In addition to the annual comprehensive financial report that we issue for the city, we also issue separate financial statements for the San Dieguito Water District, the communication to those and governance letter, and we currently have the single audit of federal awards in process. We issued our unmodified audit opinion dated December 15, 2023. That is the highest level of opinion that can be received on the financial statements. You may notice that there is an emphasis of matter paragraph also in the audit opinion. This is similar to last year for the implementation of GASB 87. This year we had the emphasis of matter due to the implementation of GASB 96, which relates to subscription-based IT arrangements.
Yeah, it's not working. Sorry.
Oh.
It's working there.
Okay.
They're not working here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I didn't mean to have my mic.
No problem. I wanted to go over a few financial statement highlights for you. You will note that the total assets, on a combined basis, the total assets increased by $39.4 million, primarily due to a $20 million loan proceeds that had not been spent as of the end of the fiscal year, and an increase in capital assets of $10 million. Total liabilities also increased approximately $64.6 million. This is primarily due to an increase in net pension and OPEB liabilities, as well as that loan payable for the $20 million. The increases in the net pension and net OPEB liability are primarily due to changes in the actuary valuations for CalPERS and the OPEB plan. Oops, my line ended up at the top. Combined revenues increased $14 million, predominantly due to a $5 million increase in property taxes and a $4.3 million increase in other general revenue as a result of increases in investment income. This is due primarily to an increase in interest rates, as well as an increase in unrealized gains on investments. Overall, the city's net position improved by $17 million. Is that right? Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Overall, the primary between governmental and business type activities increased $19.7 million. This was primarily due to the increase in revenues. For the general fund budget, the revenues of $86 million exceeded the budget of $83.6 million. The general fund expenditures of $76 million were within the council-approved budget of $86 million. All of the general fund departments operated within their budgets. The general fund revenues exceeded expenditures by $24 million. And after transfers to other funds, the general fund reported an increase of $5.5 million in fund balance. Our audit results are internal controls. We review internal controls every year as part of our audit process. We did not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal controls noted. We also audit compliance, so we had no material instances of compliance with laws and regulations. No purchasing compliance issues were noted, no investment compliance issues were noted, and no debt compliance issues were noted. I'd like to take a moment to thank Teresa and the finance staff for all of their assistance during the audit. Without all of their help, we couldn't be as efficient as we are and have as successful of an audit. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have had over the audit process or results.
Okay, thank you. And are there any public speakers?
There are no public speakers on this item?
No public
Yes.
speakers?
Are you speaking on this item?
Councilmember Ehlers,
We actually do.
two public speakers now, after, okay.
Elena Thompson and Scott Campbell.
Look at that cooperation,
Elena
that's
Thompson.
pretty impressive, just.
I'm
making a deal.
cross-dressing today.
You were already standing up, that's right.
I'm in favor of this report. The auditors do an incredible job. That's why I'm up here, because I have a few questions. They just showed a slide that said we failed to spend $10 million. I request the council to immediately place that into drainage budget. I wish I knew the number off the top of my head. I should, but I don't. That's my request. It's a huge request. I'll settle for less. The pension liability is up $37.8 million, I believe. That's at page 41. That's of concern to me, especially when it says revenues are up 14 million and expenses are up 13 million. That's it's a much larger number. And this whole net term, I like it. It's a way to balance things out over time. But I do have some questions about the terms deferred outflows. That to me sounds like we're pushing the can down the road again. Deferred inflows sounds like we're going to get less money in, so we're going to spend more money later. We're getting less money. I'd like to hear what that's about. It's interesting to me, and it seems fishy. And if it's not, I'd be gladly wrong. Thank you.
And we'll hear from Elena, but I hope you were taking notes and can answer those questions.
And I was going to ask that same question. So,
Okay.
and I asked in my briefing too, so I think they're ready.
Yeah, so thank you for the report. I did want to find out, what are the city reserves? I didn't hear that. Did we have a report on that? You might want to look at that. I don't want to use my time on that. But I just wanted to ask what the city's doing, given the economic uncertainty. The federal government has a deficit of $3 trillion. The state, a newly disclosed deficit of $68 billion. I think we're going to see a slowdown in grant money, state funding, even federal funding. And so I would urge you all, as you're looking at the follow-on expenditures above and beyond this report, such as the Buena Vista homeless shelter, as well as the cannabis regulation, this is a lot of money that's coming from the general fund. The cannabis alone is up to $700,000, and this is general fund money to be spent over a number of years to regulate cannabis in the city, and so that's tapping into the general fund. So need to be aware of that. And the other is the homeless shelter. It looks like the grant money, the PLHA funds, are short in spite of the $5 million gift from the state to pay for the shelter. It appears that one of the expense items that I think should be factored into the budget conversation is that we're going to be coming up short by over $500,000 to pay for that shelter. And what happens when the grants are gone, and what happens when we've tapped out the general fund because we don't have the same income stream from what we're used to given the deficit and economic situation. So I just want to encourage you to be looking at that, because I can't see that the general fund should be a money tree for the city to just constantly tap into without the voters' approval, seeing as that is all of our property tax money that we pay into that. So we should have some say in how those funds are spent. So that finishes my comment. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And you did just have your say. Thank you for that. And I appreciate if you could answer the questions that were asked, but we go ahead and do it through Councilmember Ehlers.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you to Teresa and the financial team and to the auditors. Such a perfect audit, right? There were no findings, no significant findings, and that's wonderful. And we are maintaining our AAA bond rating, and our debt level is all right. And I really appreciate the in-depth, thorough nature of the ACFR, the annual report, if you will, if we were a corporation. So my question was along the same lines, and I think I prepped you yesterday. So what I see is kind of surprisingly, the CalPERS returns were down, 39 million down, but yet our net position, which includes that, is 19.7 million up. And I asked you the question, and when we looked at it, you showed it to me. It was the deferred both inflow and outflow. And boy, so I'm now worried. Scott and I are not coordinating, and I'm thinking like Scott, so I should be worried maybe. But if you could give a better explanation of, I take it that was the actuarial comments, the reevaluations for actuarial of the CalPERS, but please explain a little more, because that to me is the biggest thing. Overall, our net position's better, but somehow the thing that the audience should remember is CalPERS reports 1 year in arrears. So what you're seeing in that drop is from actually a year ago. But please explain.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for the comment. I think this might be my first public comment on the financial statements. The deferred inflows and outflows are a result of a complicated accounting standard, GASB 68. They are defined in Note 1 to the financial statements. So if anyone is interested in a technical definition of those two items, they are defined in Note 1, the summary of significant accounting policies. Essentially, the changes in the net pension liability as a result of the CalPERS actuarial valuations, because they are a year behind, you do have these wonky things called deferred outflows and inflows, and they are sort of the opposite of what you think they are. The deferred outflows are actually more like an asset. So if they're directly below the assets on the statement of net position, and I like to think of them sort of as like a prepaid expense. So on the statement of net position, they'll show up as deferred outflow, but in future years they will be expensed. And then the deferred inflows are liability, and those are similar to, if you think in terms of the lease receivable and deferred inflows, that's sort of unearned revenue. So it gets recognized in a future year as revenue. And Teresa and I were looking at these earlier. The deferred inflows actually decreased, I think it was $20 million. Can you confirm? Yeah. So they went down $20 million, and the deferred outflows went up $10 million. So that's sort of like a $30 million swing. And as you mentioned, it is primarily due to the investment earnings for CalPERS, of which the city has no control over.
And one last question along that line. Were they based on the earnings from a year ago in arrears, or are the deferred inflows and outflows basically marking the CalPERS assets up to the current fiscal year?
It is as of June 30, 2022.
Okay, so it's from back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the next year, where the returns have been much, much better, in fact, better than we expected, we now expect to see the liability that went up 39 million to actually probably drop something, assuming nothing happens between now and the close of the year.
Correct. When CalPERS has a good earnings year, the city's net position in the CalPERS assets goes up, so then it reduces the liability that the city has.
Okay, appreciate the explanation. That was my only thing. I'll move approval and put that out there.
Okay, and I will second that. And I did want to comment that while I know that there's talk about economic uncertainty, if you look at, for example, the GDP growth over the last several quarters, it's been pretty impressive. And I think that at least 2 of the 3 indexes, stock indexes, have set records over the last few days, which means that a couple of years from now, when you're reporting CalPERS returns, it has the potential to be pretty significant. So I'm looking forward to that. And I have the city manager wants to add.
I was just going to say, we do have fully funded reserves, and I was hoping the finance director could mention that.
Yes, thank you, Pam, for that reminder.
Okay.
It is listed in our agenda report that we have an operating contingency reserve, which is 20% of this year's adopted operating expenditures of 18 million. And then we also have a budget stabilization reserve, which is 2% of projected revenues. That came out to 2 million. So it's a total of 20 million that we have reserved per council's policy.
And the other question I have is, the voters of Encinitas approved a cannabis sales tax. And this agenda item and other expenses that have come out of the general fund, does that sales tax allow for those monies to go into the general fund to essentially reimburse the costs of the permitting and policing and efforts in code compliance?
Yes, that's correct. I'm
Okay.
sure the city attorney can answer better, but we do have that budgeted in the general fund.
Yes, Mayor Kranz, it is a general tax. It will go into the general fund.
Okay. And it's my recollection that the projections for the first year revenue, once sales begin, that first year is projected to be 1.7 million or thereabouts. It's in the...
Right now, we only have one that we're expecting to come up and complete their whole permit process.
Okay, so the permitting, but when all 4 are operating, it's expected to be in the millions?
Yes, that's
Yes.
correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to profile a few other things that the public may have asked and may not be clear yet, and then I have a couple of comments. First of all, I have a lot of confidence in our staff, our financial staff, and that comes from years of great performance like this, so I really appreciate it. Not all cities are able to perform as well as we do here, and I'm proud of that. Thank you. So one of the good news is our revenues are up. I mean, that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. So I look forward to our budgeting season, which is just about ready to start for this next fiscal year. Over the next 6 months, we'll be talking about what our budgets are coming up and talk about where our opportunities are to focus on our top priorities. One of the questions that was asked is about state and federal money. It's my understanding that the state and federal money we get is not necessarily programmed into our budget, but we have the opportunity to be able to accept it when it's made available. But Teresa, could you maybe add a little bit to that as far as how the state's doing and how that might affect us?
Yes, what we record in our projections for revenue are the grants that we are expecting. So when the departments apply for a grant and they're awarded a grant, then that's when we will put it in our projections and then also increase the budget so that we can spend that money. But in the general fund, there really isn't, except for the gas tax, that affects us. The sales tax is what occurs in the city. Property taxes are based on our property values in the city, so it's not really, linked to the state and how the state does. So the state's revenues are different than ours. They have income tax, so as people's revenue or salaries go down, then their income taxes that flow into the state are lower. They've got other expenditures for school, hospitals and things like that. So
Certainly. Okay.
So we are linked to the state, but not as close as you would think for the general fund.
When it comes time for us to budget and look towards the future, what money we'll spend, do we take into consideration where the state's at and what they're planning on doing?
We do look at their state budget and review it to make sure there are no, I want to call them, they're called swaps. They used to do these swaps where they would say, we're going to take the school funding and take it from, well, they needed money for school. They take it from the city and they do a swap, and then we'll let, it was a whole complicated thing called the triple flip. But there was a Proposition A where the voters said that the state couldn't do that anymore. So there is less of that, although I think what they're doing is they're making us responsible for more programs.
I see, yes. Okay, thank you. So today, really, this is more backward-looking as far as this report, and this is an assessment, this is a report, this is a summary of where we, a report of where we have been, except for what we have captured in Exhibit A, which is part of the resolution that says we're going to do just a couple things here associated with our recommendation. I mean, this is the recommendation. We've got a motion and a second on the floor. And so simply what we're doing with our recommendation here is we're adding additional discretionary payment to CalPERS, as Mayor Kranz was discussing. And then we're transferring from the general fund to many of our, so we've got like 10, what they're called, they're just internal funds that we keep money in for things like the fire apparatus and vehicles and fleets. And so as far as what we're looking at, we're just kind of correcting some funds that we have and reinvesting money back in them. So that money's available for us to use as it always has been in the past. So I just wanted to clarify that if that needed to be clarified.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ehlers.
Yeah, I just wanted to note one thing. We noted that the general revenue funds are up, 8+%, but there was one area that dropped, and that was the sales tax, and that was $371,000 for BMW moving out of town and not having another car dealership open. So we ought to see, assuming, well, I guess my first question is Tesla going to be a dealership also, or are they a service organization? Because that means that if they're only service, the sales wouldn't come back.
Yes, I understand that they will also service the cars.
But will they sell too?
Yes, they are selling cars.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Cool. So buy your Teslas in Encinitas, and that money will come right back because it dropped 2%. So I thought that was kind of an important thing. But in general, overall, all the different sources, be it property tax, TOT, and the other, all went up 8% in aggregate, even with that drop in the sales tax. So.
And while the car dealers are important and they're a critical revenue stream from the sales tax, they have some weird rules about where you live versus where you buy. And so obviously if somebody who lives in Encinitas buys here in Encinitas, that's a good thing. But if somebody from Carlsbad comes to Tesla, my understanding is that the sales tax money doesn't necessarily follow here. But maybe we can have a sales tax license down the road a piece. Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
Yeah, just a quick comment, and I did want to thank the staff and for such a good report. It's nice to have this kind of financial health in the city, but I wanted to just also note the staff report talks about visitor spending increasing and eclipsing the pre-pandemic levels, which is really great. A lot of cities are not seeing that, and so I think that's also a great trend for us. So.
And I wonder if the motion maker would entertain a modification to the motion. I would like to ask direct staff to bring back an item to consider instead of a direct payment of that policy provision that makes a direct payment to CalPERS, that instead we establish a trust. There's a particular type of trust for those monies where instead of it going into the big pot at CalPERS, it goes in this trust instead, and then down the road a piece, we have some discretion over what we provide to CalPERS. Are you familiar with those trusts?
Yes, that's a Section 115 trust.
And so can we get an item that discusses the pros and cons of that?
Yes, we can
And
bring
I'm-
something back. We actually aren't recommending that at this time, but we are happy to, there's several consultants who would love to come here and give
Okay.
us a
And
presentation
so
on
I'm
that.
open to that, absolutely. Does that mean that the money doesn't transfer yet, or just so
You know,
we're clear
I'm
in the
okay
motion?
with going with the policy as it's stated
Okay.
and just let her rip, and then going forward, we hear this report, next time we're talking about the budget, we'll make the decision, and so I'm okay with the way we're doing it now. It's you know.
And I accept that.
It's to me, it's an important, you know, to acknowledge that we're doing a little bit extra. When we're looking at the numbers that are involved, it's a kind of small extra, but it's extra. And I just want to make sure that, you know, whatever extra we're doing is in the best interest of the city. And I've heard good things about those trusts, and apparently there are some bad things about them.
I don't think that, just to be clear, it's, there's nothing bad about those trusts, but a lot of it is dependent upon how much you can put into the trust and where you're at with your, the finance people could say it much
so
more
I want to learn more.
eloquently.
You're okay with that modification? All right. We have a motion and a second. Hey, we get to push buttons?
All right now.
Yeah.
Motion carries unanimously.
And just to be clear, it's not really a button, it's just like this target on the monitor, so.
For a minute there, I thought we had AI now taking over in our software, but
Okay, so moving on to item 10B, please. Thank you again to staff and your efforts, appreciate it a lot. And the auditor. Patty, are you going to lead this one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're ready when you are.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and fellow council members. My name is Patty Anders. I'm the Planning Manager for Housing and Policy Division, and I will be presenting the Buena Creek Navigation Center. And I would like to note that we have Stephen Gonzalez, our Homeless Solutions Manager, and of course, Carrie Cusack, our Development DSD Director, but also we have Jonathan Lung with the City of Vista, our Homeless Services Program Manager, and also Steve Shalengi from Retread are also here this evening if we have any questions for them. So I just want to acknowledge that. Okay, February 2021, Encinitas City Council adopted the city's Homeless Action Plan, or HAP, which addresses the needs within the community and reduces the number of those experiencing homelessness and ensuring the safety and welfare of those experiencing homelessness. Action 2 of Goal 2 in the city's HAP is to enhance interim housing system capacity based on agreed-upon standards for the operation of an emergency shelter that reflects national best practices. And establishing the Buena Vista Navigation Center, or I'm going to refer to it as the BCNC, would, with the City of Vista, would fulfill this goal. So the city found a property for the BCNC, and staff began coordinating with the City of Vista and the landlord. On September 2nd of last year, Vista City Council approved the master lease agreement with Santa Fe House LLC for the grounds and property located at 2148 South Santa Fe Avenue, 2164 South Santa Fe, and 2170 through 2172 South Santa Fe Avenue. On September 27th of last year, Encinitas City Council authorized and approved a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, between the City of Encinitas and the City of Vista to cooperate on the establishment of a low-barrier navigation center for adults only in North County, San Diego, and the release of a joint RFP, or request for proposals, for a service provider for the BCNC. The RFP was released on September 29th of last year and posted on the City of Vista's procurement website with a response submittal deadline of November 29th of last year. One response was received by Retread Inc.
So the MOU between the City of Encinitas and Vista was fully executed on December 5th, 2023, which stipulates that Vista is responsible for 75% of the cost for operations and leasing of the BCNC, and Encinitas is responsible for 25%. Accordingly, Vista will have 25% of the bed allocation, and Encinitas will have 25%. However, there is an understanding that the cities will use reasonable efforts to accommodate clients of the other city. The cities will maintain a detailed accounting of bed allocation to ensure that this 25% and 75% ratio is maintained. So this slide shows an overview of the BCNC site, which is comprised of 3 separate parcels, as shown in yellow, with 4 separate buildings. Encinitas would have exclusive use of 1 floor of 2172 South Santa Fe Avenue, as shown in the yellow arrow. Encinitas would have the lower level of this building, which consists of 6 rooms with a total of 12 bed capacity. Each floor in both buildings has its own address, kitchen, living space, 2 bathrooms, and secured locked entry. There is a shared administration building and garage at 2148 South Santa Fe Avenue above the residential buildings, as shown on the slide. If approved by the City Council, the master lease agreement would commence on February 1 of this year and continue through December 31st of 2026 for a 35-month term. The master lease agreement allows for 2 additional 1-year lease extensions. The monthly lease payment is $11,000 per month, or $121,000 for the first year and $132,000 annually thereafter, for a total cost for all 5 months of $385,000. And I'm happy to report that all the buildings, the residential units and the admin building, were extensively remodeled, and it's a pretty significant improvement. So a proposal from Retread Inc. was received in response to the RFP. Encinitas staff coordinated with City of Vista in reviewing and assessing the proposal, and an interview was conducted with both cities and Retread on December 13th of last year. Retread's proposal included a comprehensive program which addresses key considerations for the successful delivery of services for Encinitas and Vista residents experiencing homelessness, with on-site services at the BCNC. Based on the response to the RFP and the interview, the cities agreed that Retread Inc. would be a competent service operator for the BCNC, and on January 9th of this year, Vista City Council approved Retread as the BCNC service operator. So if approved by the City Council, the contract would begin with Retread and Encinitas to operate the BCNC on February 1st and continue through December 31st, 2024. The contract allows for the term to be extended at the city's option for an additional 24 months at increments of the city's choice, not to extend past December 31st of 2026. To prepare for the BC anticipated opening of March 4th of this year, Retread incurred startup costs beginning in January of this year. In coordination with the City of Vista, it recommends that Retread be reimbursed in February for the startup cost incurred in January to facilitate the March 4th opening. So Encinitas' total cost for the 25% of Retread's services is $349,185 per year and $1,047,055 for all 3 years. So future years of operation would require a new agreement and additional funding source. So the total cost for Encinitas to operate the BCNC for 3 years, including the service provider, the lease agreement, and utilities, is $1,468,555. The total permanent local housing allocation, or PLHA, funding as estimated by HUD is just over $933,000. Therefore, Encinitas' total cost not covered by the PLHA funding to operate and lease the BCNC for 3 years would be approximately $511, as outlined and shown in the table here. So we've discussed the cost of the BCNC, and now I'd like to discuss the operations and services that will be provided. Eligibility to enter the center would be from designated Encinitas and Vista Homeless Services staff and contractors only. There would be no walk-ins allowed. So information conducted at intake would include basic demographics, assessment of being free from communicable disease, ability to perform activities of daily living or ADLs, and the need for special accommodations. It would also include pet intake, an assessment of partner and couple needs. On January 9th of this year, Vista City Council approved Retread Inc. as the BCN service provider with one condition of approval, which was restricting individuals convicted of violent sexual crimes, rape, per Penal Code 261. And they would be excluded from being permitted into the BCNC. And Encinitas staff concurs with this restriction, and this requirement has been added to the service provider's scope of work to ensure that this restriction is enforced. So some of the amenities provided at the BCNC will include a clean and furnished sleeping space with a bed, a dresser, a nightstand, and locking storage for their personal belongings, a hygiene kit, 3 meals a day, laundry, a pet play area and washing station, coordination of transportation, including off-site care, on-site medical and dental care, regular classes and group meetings for topics such as trauma, addiction, recovery, anger management, peer support, and financial literacy. Retread Inc. would provide support services and case management for clients, including the development of an individualized service plan, or ISP, upon intake, and continued case management and assessment of the ISP throughout the client's stay. Retread staff would also provide evaluation and goal setting for benefits, housing, employment and finances, physical and mental health, and education. So Retread staff would provide ongoing case management, which is super important for the resident's success, and it would include, but not be limited to, weekly check-ins on accomplishing the ISP goals and updating as needed, working through navigation curricular workbook, time management and planning skills, budgeting, coping mechanism and journaling, and SMART goals. Retread staff would also assist with securing self-sufficiency benefits, navigation services, housing search and placement services, coordination of and transportation to and from medical care appointments, development and coordination of support groups for peer support, and fostering a sense of community within the BCNC. And more services as outlined in the scope of work included in Reso 2024-13, Attachment A of Attachment 1. So a detailed list of Retread operational functions and services is provided in the scope of work I just mentioned, and it does include procurement, installment, and maintenance of infrastructure, including furnishings and security equipment throughout the BCNC, security staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year, weekly professional daily staff cleaning and sanitizing, regular maintenance of buildings and landscaping, as well as ongoing staff training, including trauma-informed care, CPR, harm reduction, conflict resolution and de-escalation, and motivational interviewing. So upon approval of the recommended contract, Retread Inc. anticipates a 6 to 8 week timeline for implementation and startup. The implementation period will include the procurement and installment of all BCNC infrastructure, including the furniture and security systems I mentioned, as well as procurement of subcontracted operations and hiring of staff. Retread is planning 2 open houses before the grand opening. One would be for the current and potential service providers, and one would be for emergency services providers. Retread has proposed, as I mentioned, the grand opening for the BCNC on Monday, March 14th, but is committed to opening sooner if possible. So that concludes my long presentation, and with that, staff is recommending that the City Council approve Reso 2024-13 to approve the agreement with Retread to provide operational services for the BCNC, and approve Reso 2024-14 to authorize the city manager in consultation with the city attorney to execute the master lease agreement for the BCNC, and approve Resolution 2024-07 amending the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 budget. And this does conclude my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you. And are there any public comments?
We have no public speakers on this item.
No public speakers. So are there any questions from the City Council? Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. Thanks for the great presentation. I'm so pleased with this program. It's so innovative and creative, and I'm really happy that we did get a service provider that responded to the RFP, because that was a concern that perhaps we wouldn't be able to afford it, or maybe there wasn't anybody that was uniquely qualified to support us in that. I think it's really appealing that it's non-congregate care. So the whole city council actually had the chance to go visit the site, and it was so wonderful to just see how much space there is, the support facilities that are on site, the living spaces themselves are bright and clean and airy, and it just is an appealing place that I think people want to take us up on the offer of shelter for. So thank you for all of that hard work. I just had a few questions. One relates to the slide that included food and transportation. Let's see.
Let's see. Right here.
Yes, that's the one. So those amenities that are mentioned, I'm thinking particularly of transportation. I serve on NCTD and also on the board of FACT, and it's a big cost, and it's always a little bit difficult to manage and pay for. So is this something that Retread is going to be handling as well as part of their service?
Yes, so Retread currently operates the Green Oaks Ranch, which is about 2 miles away. So they're going to be utilizing the existing service transportation system that they have there. So they're able to leverage a lot of those kinds of secondary services to help with cost reduction and to provide the services. So,
That's wonderful.
yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
great.
And then another question is, you mentioned that there is going to be some consideration of flexibility between the city of Encinitas and the city of Vista, but that we're going to, it sounded then that you said we're going to pretty strictly adhere to the 25-75% makeup. So does that mean that even if there are beds available and one city isn't filling them or the other city could, we're not going to be able to spread them that way?
We are going to work together to serve as many clients as we can, but we want to be respectful and maintain that we have 25% beds that we're paying for. But we're going to accommodate as much as we can and try to serve as many people as we can. But we'll just keep a detailed accounting so that each city has their appropriate ratio that what they're paying for.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear that we're going to have some flexibility about that. Just a quick question. It sounds like that the facility was significantly remodeled, and that was all cost borne by the landlord. Is that correct?
And our great partners at the City of Vista actually
Wonderful.
chipped in some of that as well.
That's so great. And then final question is, the grand opening is March 4th, and it sounds like we'll be ready to open our doors and have folks coming in to live on that date. So we're doing all the preparation now to offer the shelter and queue folks up to do that.
Correct. If all goes well, we would have the two meetings with the grand opening with the service providers and the emergency services, and then the grand opening, we're shooting for March 4th.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Ehlers?
Yeah, let's see, where do I start? Well, I'll start with questions. Performance measures on page 19, it talks about by the end of the contract period, various performance measures. It said we'd service 63 Encinitas residents. I assume that means essentially 21 per year?
Was that?
And the reason I'm asking is so that we go into this knowing what metric we should be looking at and how we measure performance. It's almost at the bottom of page 19 out of 89. Page 12 of the staff from the professional services agreement.
Was that for a year or?
Yeah, it says BCNC will provide shelter and services to a minimum of 63 unduplicated Encinitas residents experiencing homelessness. And it said it was over the contract period. And so my question is, contract period's 3 years, but there are extensions. Would it extend for each extension year another 21 that we'd be looking for? I'm just trying to understand performance.
We are targeting to serve the 63 per year.
No, that's not what it says. It says contract period. It says by the end of the contract period, which I think is 3 years, right?
Well, the initial one is only for 1 year. We'd
Okay.
have to go back and extend it. So thank you for bringing that clarification to our attention.
That's exactly why I'm asking, yeah. So we go into this heads up. Yep. And so I assume so per year, then the 12% of Encinitas residents will exit to permanent housing. That this is being our low-end goal, and 48% will go into bridge housing, recovery program, or whatever. Great. I think I do. Okay, so we're all on the same page there. Yeah, I support this. This is great. Actually, what helped me, I also looked at the Green Oaks Ranch operation and looked at online, and they had a lot of good information. I see, boy, we're like leveraging their expertise. We're leveraging the partnership and the even bigger contribution coming from the Vista side. So it's a good economy of scale opportunity for us. So. Now, the one clarification we talk about, there was a grant from Senator Blake Sphere's office, but I looked for it actually in the ACFR, or not in the I guess it wouldn't be in the ACFR because that was last year, but that went straight through Vista's books, so it didn't even hit our books at all. So to be clear, part of the payment, if you can, this is a partnership. The money went there, they accounted for it there. No problem, and we didn't pay for some other stuff, and so I think it all came out in the wash. The goal is that this is a 30-day homeless shelter, but that's not a hard and fast rule, but the idea is that in order to get to that 63 per year, we can't have people dwelling and living here permanently. It's a navigation center. I just want to get confirmation here publicly.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And the goal is there are measures that clients have to be participating in their recovery, and the goal is to navigate them to the next place where they need to go, whatever that service may be.
Yeah, and as you explained during our briefing, it's not a hard and fast rule, and that's for a reason, because as you bring in new inductees, they need to go through a transition, and they may not jump right into the first level, but the goal is this 30-day period in order to get to the throughput and get them onto their forever home, so to speak. So this is a like a foster, or I like to call it triage, navigation set, or whatever you want to do. So. Okay, great, and I support this, and I don't think I have any other questions, so thank you.
Councilmember Lyons.
I don't have any other questions other than what my colleagues have already asked. I just want to say I'm really excited to be here and have this in front of us for approval. I especially want to thank the City of Vista for being such a great partner to us on this. So please make sure everyone knows that we're appreciating the partnership with you. We're really, speak for myself, looking forward to us being able to take this under our wing and help to connect our unsheltered people with solutions and services. And I also do want to thank Catherine Blake Spear, our senator, for her generous support of this effort. Without that, I'm not sure it would move forward. It would be unlikely. So that was amazing. And with that, I'd like to move approval of the recommended action.
I'll second that.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
I was going to second it as well, but I would say I don't have any questions. I just wanted to also call out that, Councilmember Hinsey's comments about it being very innovative, but you don't see many examples of cities working together. And I just really want to encourage our staff. I know we talked about this earlier this week, is just let's keep looking for those opportunities to work with other cities in solving the bigger challenges. So appreciate all the work here.
Yes, I too am really pleased to see this and to get to this point. There was some history of this issue of homelessness, our approval of our homeless action plan, but a lot of work went into the subject of homelessness before we actually approved that plan, and homelessness has been a top issue to the residents of this city for quite some time. There is obviously not 100% agreement on the homeless action plan and the steps that we pledged to take as a city, but I think that we have adopted a plan that has the necessary tools. It has compassion. It has the resources. It has an approach that I think takes into consideration the many things that contribute to the issue of homelessness. And for me, it's when I see a homeless person, I can only think there, but for the grace of God, go I. And so it is something that I think is pretty important subject, and we're very fortunate to have received the proposal. I know the group is fairly new in partnership. The name of your group, Retread, reminds me of my father a lot because he always bought Retread tires for our trucks. I don't know if that's what the name is from, the tire, but I wonder if somebody from Retread could get up and speak and tell us, just give us a little bit of information about how you got into this business. Yes, sir.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pete Haggard. I'm going to be the program director over at Retread. For the last 3.5 years, I've been working at an organization called PATH, People Assisting the Homeless. I was the outreach worker and a lead case manager over there. And last year, I was actually able to get to be the Outreach Worker of the Year for the City and County of San Diego. I was able to get more people housed than anybody in the City and County of San Diego for the last 2 years. And then when I heard that some of my friends over at Green Oaks Ranch were starting a new organization to be able to go after the topic of homelessness up in Vista, I was super excited to join them. And so I got to join them with my expertise of working with service providers, providing case management, wraparound case management. And they kind of presented the plan to me, and I was super excited about joining them.
Fantastic. And I wish you great success.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And the one last thing I would mention about success is that, the potential to fill this facility up is there. I do get the distinct impression that we have more homeless people on the streets of Encinitas than we have rooms at this facility. So success will present us with a challenge of trying to figure out additional solutions. Stephen, is it possible you could speak to that particular issue?
Yes, absolutely. And I believe with the wraparound services and the connections throughout the county with all the different agencies, that's super important to make sure that we're setting those goals and moving forward and making sure that the individuals are being able to pick their path, but have the help to move along as quickly as we can so we can free up the beds to be able to help more people moving forward.
Yes, and I too appreciate Mayor Franklin and Vista and the whole council. You have taken some really important steps. It's great to be partnering with you. I know you have a safe parking lot program similar to what we have here in Encinitas, and these are some critical steps, so thank you for that. We do have a request to speak from the city manager.
I don't usually say much on any of these items, but I just want to take you back a little over a year ago, not even 18 months ago. Former Development Services Director Roy asked if they could apply for a PLHA grant, and if we applied for that grant, we might be able to hire a social worker. And then we did that, and our person, Stephen, has only been here a year. So in less than 18 months, and I know it seems like this kind of came together. This doesn't happen in government. We have 2 cities, a grant from a state agency, a different form of funding from another state grant for another city, and in less than 18 months, we're signing an agreement. And I've been in this business for a really long time. This might be the only time you ever experience this. So I really think it's very important. This team sitting here at the dais and our partners from Vista and all of you electeds from each city should really take pride, because it is something extremely unusual, and people will be writing articles about it, and studying how it happened. So just want to give a shout out to the team and how fantastic they worked to make this happen, and quickly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I would also like to speak to Elena Thompson's point about the fact that the resources down the road are not certain. And so these 3 years, I think that the general fund contribution is manageable for sure. We'll be using the success or lack thereof to make decisions in the future about general fund commitments to this program. Hopefully, the state continues to provide some resources, and I think that the key to this is how well it works. So I'm wishing you all the best of luck and expressing my appreciation for you being in this line of work. So with that, we are ready to vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all. On to item 10C, which is Second Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement between the City of Encinitas and HDL companies for cannabis management services and initiation of amendments to the municipal code and the local coastal program to implement state law SB 1186. And we're going to hear from Senior Planner Evan Jednak.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, City Council, and members of the public. I'm Evan Jednak, Senior Planner, here to present item 10C, an update on the implementation of the cannabis ordinance. So there are 3 objectives for this item. The first is to amend the contract between the city and our consultant HDL for cannabis management services. The second is to initiate amendments to the municipal code and local coastal program to implement Senate Bill 1186. And third is to provide an update on the status of cannabis retail applicants. The city originally entered into contract with HDL for cannabis management services in January 2021. A first amendment was made to the contract in March 2022, due primarily to the fact that the original contract was only scoped for 25 retail lottery applications and over 200 were received. We are now requesting a second amendment that would extend the contract until June 30th, 2025, with an additional $79,500 to be split between this and the next fiscal year, and there is an option to extend the contract for 2 additional one-year periods. So there are numerous state and local regulatory requirements for cannabis businesses, and the city requires technical expertise to ensure legal compliance for our 4 retailers selected in the lottery. As these businesses begin to open, staff anticipates several ongoing cannabis-related tasks requiring the professional services of HDL, listed here including pre-licensed site inspections, change of ownership review and supplemental background checks, permit renewals, compliance inspections, annual revenue audits, and general technical assistance and subject matter expertise. So the second discussion item tonight is the initiation of amendments to implement SB 1186. This law went into effect on January 1st of this year, and it precludes cities from adopting or enforcing any regulation that directly or indirectly prohibits retail delivery of medicinal cannabis. Further, the law requires that cities allow 1 or more non-storefront medicinal cannabis delivery-only retail establishment. So staff recommends that non-storefront medicinal cannabis delivery retail locations be permitted in the business park and or light industrial zones only. These are the zoning districts where distribution is allowed under Measure H, of which this use is most similar to because it does not involve customer visits to the establishment. So here's an update slide on the status of each of our 4 cannabis retail applicants that were successful in the lottery in order of their anticipated opening. The Cake House at 583 South Coast Highway is under construction and nearing completion, and since the agenda report was published, they also did receive their state DCC license. ECR Encinitas 4 at 211 North El Camino Real is also under construction and has also obtained their state license. Stizzy at 1030 North Coast Highway has completed the building plan check process, and they are preparing to begin construction shortly. They have not yet obtained their state license. And last is Siesta Life Encinitas at 1038 South Coast Highway. They're still in the building plan check process. They have obtained their state license. So 3 of the 4 have obtained the state license. And with that, it's recommended that the City Council authorize the City Manager, in coordination with the City Attorney, to execute a second amendment to the Professional Consultant Services Agreement for Cannabis Management Services with HDL, 2, to adopt Resolution 2024-11, amending the fiscal year 23-24 budget. And third, to adopt Resolution 2412, directing staff to initiate amendments to the municipal code and the local coastal program to implement SB 1186. That concludes the presentation, and we are here for questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there public speakers on this item?
Yes, there are. The first three speakers are Trina Priest, Terry Ann Skelly, followed by Mark Wilcox.
Good evening again. My name is Trina Priest. I'm a middle school teacher, mother of three teenagers. I came this evening to express my concerns about throwing more money at enabling marijuana businesses in our city as recommended in item 10C. The repercussions of marijuana businesses in Encinitas is that it normalizes marijuana use to teens and young adults as some sort of default solution for stress, anxiety, and depression. The negative result is staggering for young adults and the families that care about them, and dramatically contributes to our city's public safety and welfare concerns. A UCSD epidemiologist recently stated that, quote, a burgeoning public health crisis is only getting started regarding drug use, and that lawmakers should rein in the for-profit addiction industries like the sale of tobacco, marijuana, and CBD products in our neighborhoods. I wonder if we all really comprehend what the consequences are of having marijuana storefronts in our town with its pervasive signage and advertising. Their visibility and promotion threatens, sabotages, and diverts the lives of young people. Let the marijuana permittees pay for the increased city need for more money and consultant services, not the parents and other community members. Thank you.
Ann Skelly?
Good evening again. I'm Terry Ann Skelly. I'm a public health educator and an advocate for good public health policies, especially at my parent group meetings. I have two grave concerns regarding item 10C. My first concern is staff recommendation 1 and 2, second amendment to the professional service agreement between the City of Encinitas and HDL companies for cannabis management services. Apparently, the city is seeking to increase funding to an already existing contract with HDL for cannabis consultant services. From a taxpayer standpoint, I don't understand why taxpayers are paying for the increase in oversight and investigation services. It was my understanding that the city would establish fees for applicants and permittees to cover the city's expenses. It's good to remember that marijuana business applicants and permittees make money by their sales of high-potency THC marijuana products in our city. And HDL consultants are not an independent, unbiased resource. They profit from charging consulting fees and make cannabis businesses happy by assisting cities with establishing tax rates, often too obliging in my perception. My second concern is staff recommendation 3, which is resolution of the City Council to initiate amendments to the municipal code regarding the implementation of state law SB 1186, allowing non-storefront medicinal cannabis delivery. I feel this staff recommendation should be considered at a separate City Council meeting since it is not a budget issue, but a municipal code change. Thank you.
Mark Wilcox, followed by Peggy Walker, and then Scott Campbell.
Good evening, City Council. Mark Wilcox again. I come here tonight as a taxpayer and devoted family man. For a substantial cost, the City of Encinitas has hired HDL consultant to develop and review the registration process for cannabis uses and activities in the city. Encinitas now has 4 marijuana storefronts, all in different stages of completion. It looks like 2 of the 4 shops don't have DCC licenses, and 2 of the 4 shops don't have city building permits. I'm urging the city not to allow these businesses to open until all requirements have been met. The big concern going forward is the fees and tax revenue collected from these businesses. Will it really offset the cost of management and administrative enforcement, oversight activities, public outreach, and education? These could impact the city's general fund, and taxpayers should not be responsible to pick up the tab for these 4 marijuana businesses. These are not benign businesses. Marijuana contributes to those who struggle with substance abuse and homelessness. Most of the so-called benefits of this drug are a false narrative pushed by the groups that stand to profit from expanded access, while our families pay the price with increased taxes, with their health, and with their lives. And just a quick side note on regard to the budget, since we heard about that tonight, the high interest rates were a result in increased revenue last year. This year, lower interest rates will be the norm, and even lower next year as the inflation decreases. The interest income will go down, so that is a factor in also evaluating these fees as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Peggy Walker again, and I just want to say, to start with, in my work, this is so troublesome for me because in my work, every day I see report after report, news article after news article, science-based study after study that extol the excruciating pain marijuana availability is exacting on our youth, young adults, on their families, and on our communities. That being said, I also find in this report that not to exceed really doesn't mean not to exceed. It apparently is a starting point for future fee amendments, because what we see is that HDL's original agreement was for $98,000 something. Then it was amended to not to exceed $568,000 something, and now an additional $79,000 something brings it to a new not to exceed agreement of $648,000 something, 6 times the original cost. And I just wonder where that not to exceed will stop. These incremental fee changes seem a bit furtive, considering HDL is, to quote a news article, the most influential shaper of the state's marijuana market. And shouldn't HDL, consultant to roughly 125 cities and counties in this state, be more astute than to estimate 25 applicants for Encinitas, a prime beachside community, when 207 came rolling in? How can a firm called the kingmaker of the California cannabis market underestimate the number of technical assistant hours the city would need? This troubles me. And I'll admit, I'm a grandmother and a youth mentor, and I really don't like seeing 3 cannabis retail outlets going downtown on the main street where I go all the time with my kids, my youth that I mentor, my family, my grandchildren. I don't like it, and I know there's nothing you can do about it. But I just want to add one note. I know that the mayor said the tax revenues will go into the general fund, and yes, they will. But what we've seen is those tax revenues don't always materialize like a city thinks they will. That remains to be seen. But in addition to that, experts say that for every dollar in tax revenues received, there's a cost of $5 in social costs, ER admissions, hospitalizations, mental health treatment. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
I agree with those previous speakers. I got a few little different areas to talk about on this. I like that we're getting out in front of an issue. the retail deliveries or non-retail store deliveries. We're getting out in front of the issue. Too bad it's about cannabis. I mean, there's much bigger things we can get out in front of as a city. I definitely agree with the fact that if you're planning on making a code change, maybe I'm wrong, I probably am, but shouldn't that be a public hearing situation and not just an agenda item? When this started up, they predicted 25 applicants, and we got 207. We made a lot of money on that. So this request for the staffing is pretty modest. But I do have to ask, what is the expected income from this? I hear we're going to make money, but what is the range? 1 million to 2 million, 1 million to 100,000, 10,000 to 10 million? I mean, those are totally different numbers. What's the expected, and what's the variability on that? We need to know this so we can make good decisions. You can't just say we're going to make money. That doesn't tell us anything. Another thing that really struck me out on this was site inspections. And they talked about verify compliance with state and local laws annually. Once a year is not enough. I mean, we're talking about controlled substances. Once a year inspections of their thing is not enough. You got to question who's doing these inspections. I mean, I saw the rate slips, but these look like junior people on that thing. Once again, I'm jealous. I wish I could charge $200 an hour for what I do. The verified compliance with state and local laws. I want to contrast that with the checklist, what we have for street dining. We are out of compliance with our city laws, and we're permitting that to go. Will we permit these cannabis dispensary places to be out of compliance at the same rate that the street dining is out of compliance? These are, I mean, what I said before, one law applies to everybody. It's not special people. The city voted for cannabis. We're going to get it. We have a tax. I really don't know what we're going to get out of this. There's a lot of competition out there. You have a nice decision to make. Thanks.
Thank you. Evan, the staff report does indicate that there were 2 retailers who do not have the DCC license, but your slide presentation, I think, showed that 3 did.
Yes, that is correct. Since the staff report was published, we received notification that one more DCC license for the Cake House was obtained.
Okay. And I appreciate the public comments. I opposed Measure H. It passed in a very close vote. One of the reasons why I opposed it is because the amount of bureaucratic issues that we were going to be dealing with I knew would be significant, and we had other things that we needed to focus on. HDL was a solution that was available because they had the expertise. We didn't have to hire employees to do the application reviews and to be able to comply with the law. So it makes sense to me to continue to work with HDL for the rollout, the opening of these businesses, and so I do support the amendment. And it's my hope, to speak to one of the comments, that we don't continue to get, increases in the not to exceed amount. But I also am interested in knowing what is the long-range plan, because if in fact, we got more work that at that first year we might find HDL's got other things that they didn't account for in this particular proposal, and it's possible we could see several future not to exceed contract amendments. Is that correct?
Mayor Crowns, I think ongoing, we're going to look to expert like HDL to do the deep dive of inspections that they do. I've had prior experience with HDL and cannabis businesses in another city, in which there are a lot more than there are here, and HDL was a very successful help to the city in terms of providing the expertise that we would not be able to acquire in terms of the state law, and certainly any of the costs that were incurring are recovered through our fees through these cannabis businesses. So the amounts that you see in these proposed tonight are covered through those fees. And if our cost in engaging HDL over time increases, you'll see us coming back to ensure that we're recouping all those costs from the applicants. And then kind of ongoing, we may see increases over time. But again, we will come back to you to be sure that those applicants are passed on those costs. And ongoing as well, we'll have a constant code enforcement presence and partnership with the Sheriff's Department to be sure that even though, we may only have periodic inspections with the deep dive with HDL, that we're going to be keeping our eye on them. We're going to be stopping in as we can do under state law and stopping in unannounced and just making sure things are the way they're supposed to be, and take that very seriously, that these businesses operate in compliance with our laws and in compliance with the state law.
Great. And that's a great segue. I see the sheriff's captain is back, and I wonder if he would take a seat and speak to the issues related to law enforcement and potential budgetary impacts. Do you want to speak first?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Great question. So related to law enforcement, we were already pre-planning last year, working with the DA's office on how we would take an enforcement posture related to operations to make sure that these businesses remain in compliance, and that especially the sale to minors is obviously a big concern within the community and our concern as well. And we'll be keeping a close eye on how it relates to the downtown area with issues related to public intoxication as well as driving under the influence. Many of our DUIs last year were a combination of alcohol and drugs, whether it be marijuana or others. So we have to keep that into account and keep an eye on those things. So we're prepared to do that.
Okay, thank you. Deb, you want to speak?
I was just going to say another big component of this is, as the captain mentioned, we want as many eyes on these businesses, and we only have 4, which is good because it's only 4. There are some cities that have quite a few more. And we also want to make sure that they're audited every year, that they are paying what they're supposed to be paying in their taxes, because we do plan to use some of that for our extra enforcement efforts. So,
thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Yes, thank you. This is really good dialogue. I'm glad we've got this item so that we can really kind of just shine a light on everything that's been going on and how we're going to proceed in the near future. But my specific question, I have a specific question for staff, more associated with the new state law associated with SB 1186. The way I'm reading it is that each city is, one of the things is that we're required to allow one or more non-storefront medicinal cannabis delivery only retail establishment. So it's to be located within our jurisdiction in order to serve patients and caregivers. So when I read that, and I know the concerns of our community about the 4 retail we already have approved, here we have an opportunity to limit this the non-storefront medical cannabis delivery only retail establishments to just 1 in our city, if we choose to. Can we do that? Can we, I mean, it looks like we can, but is there something I need to know?
Well, we can limit it to just 1. We have to allow at least 1.
Allow.
Yes,
Yeah.
we could limit it to 1, and as stated in the report, we can choose which zoning districts it is allowed in.
Am I missing something on the report? That's not included in the recommendation, is it? We just identify which zones it could be located in, but it's not limiting it to 1.
Yeah, the recommendation is just to initiate the amendments. So we'll come back at a future time with the actual amendments. But yeah, I mean, the intent was to get any feedback on that. In the body of the report, it discusses staff's recommendation. It's not shown on the slide here. But that is staff's recommendation, that it be limited to the business park and light industrial zone, similar to the distribution use that Measure H already allows.
So I appreciate that specific recommendation, but I would like to, I'll listen to my colleagues' input, but I'm really in favor of giving direction in this action we take to limit it to 1. So that we meet the requirements, but we don't all of a sudden find ourselves with many more cannabis non-retail businesses.
Councilmember Lyons, I'd like to weigh in and just, our intention would be to come back with an ordinance that would only allow one, unless we already hear differently from council tonight, but that would be our intention, that the ordinance that we would bring forward would only allow one.
Okay, good.
Sounds like you have been reading the room with your recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ehlers.
And great, I'm going to go right down that same line, so I appreciate that. But first, I wanted to address what I heard. It was a general concern that we're going to be using taxpayer money, or I should say, general revenues from other sources to fund this. And I think somebody pointed out earlier that we got, $1.35 million just from application fees, and we only paid out $500,000 or so directly to HDL. So we're already starting ahead, which is good, and I agree, we'll monitor it. So the other one was the not to exceed concept, and that's something I really appreciate, because anytime we look at a contract, we look at the not to exceed number. So what's the worst possible case that could occur? So I always look at that. I like to think of these contracts. Once you set up a contract with an HDL, it's a master services agreement. And then as we add services, each one of those amendments, and that's what we're talking about, a second amendment tonight, is adding services and costs. Sometimes it's a cost increase, but most of these have been added years, like 2 extra years of service, or 3, was it, Evan?
Initial term goes till June 2025, so it's about 18 months.
Yeah, and that's amendment number 2. One of the big parts of the increase was adding the years.
Right.
So we're actually getting more, and it's all under this one services agreement. But you don't have to go set up a whole new contract each time. I do the same way at my business. So I actually appreciate the not to exceed, and I think we're making a good choice. So I just wanted to address that. The code changes with SB 1186. I agree with the limit to 1. I do have a question. What about out-of-town delivering to in-town? Can we regulate, and can we limit that if we offer opportunity for one deliverer based in Encinitas?
It's my understanding we cannot regulate delivery into the city.
Councilmember Ehlers, if I can address your question.
So
under SB 1186, we cannot prohibit delivery of medicinal cannabis into the city, but we can regulate it in any manner that we apply or would apply to any other cannabis use, either new or
Can we
to be established.
limit the number of delivery, whether inside or outside, number of licenses we allow, much like we've done?
We cannot limit the number of licensed operators who deliver into the city, or the amount of deliveries that are made into the city. Or we can tax it, we can regulate it, we can require them to register to pay our cannabis tax and so forth.
Okay, so we'd have to treat them similar to what we do now, where they'd have to pay for an audit or whatever, and so there would be significant fees if somebody was going to deliver here.
Correct.
Okay, cool. What about, I think what I see happening is that we have a lot of small operators that got in the lottery and won. And what I expect to see is these, in the coming years, they'll get up and running, and then they're going to sell off to, what was the term that I heard, the Costco of cannabis. And we're going to end up dealing with much larger organizations. Does our fee structure and potentially our future law, should it anticipate that and think about how we handle auditing a multi-state operator of cannabis stores?
Councilmember Ehlers, the fees and the structure and auditing would remain the same. I would kind of come back to HDL's expertise in this space. One of the things that I experienced in my prior city was that as soon as some of these places opened, they sold right away. And that's something that we're going to be keeping tabs on and ensuring the new owners comply with all our requirements, get all their background checks. And then also HDL has, because they are doing this in multiple cities, they're aware of all these major players who are doing this. They're used to working with these folks. They're used to auditing these folks. And so I feel confident that HDL is going to be able to pass muster in terms of doing that job and doing that job well.
Okay, but we've taken into account travel costs because if suddenly it's up in Portland, they have to go to do the audit. It's not in San Diego or, in Encinitas ideally, because I think we always think it's always going to be in Encinitas. And I'm thinking this is quickly going to get beyond that and we should be anticipating it. Just make sure we make them cover all the costs. You heard the concerns from the audience, and I think we all have the same concern. So as we move forward with the ordinance update, and you come back with proposed ordinance, I would like to see that added to the recommendations by Council Member Lyons. And so I support what you said and would go that next step further. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
Yeah, a lot of my questions were answered, so I have one remaining question and then just some comments about enforcement. And thanks for the presentation, appreciate it. We had Scott Campbell raised, do we have a projection of like worst case, best case for the cannabis tax revenue we anticipate?
My understanding is that the number that Mayor Crayons mentioned earlier this evening of approximately $1.7 million is our future projection once they're all open. And that's, again, referring back to my prior city, the numbers that we achieved from, thinking about 4 outlets, that's actually, to me, a conservative number, seeing what the revenues that I saw prior to my returning here.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. Then I'll make a couple of comments about just the enforcement plan. We have HDL that will come in and do compliance inspection once a year to each of the 4 once they're operating. And that seems pretty thorough, but much more financial focused probably. Is that correct? That's a good interpretation?
It is financially focused. However, HDL did confirm that their annual inspection is designed specifically to seek out illegal products. So their annual inspection will include checking transportation manifests against on-hand inventory, for example, checking inventory against what is sold, seeking out any anomalies. So their inspection system is, it does go beyond just the financial aspect.
And that's great.
If I could add to that, they actually do. We have an audit portion which has a fee that goes along with it, and HDL has audit services, and then we also have the site inspections. And the site inspections actually go further and actually dive into how they, things like do they have the proper packaging? Are they how are they displaying their product? How are they storing their product? Do the employees have their name badges? Are all the background checks of all the people that are supposed to have them in order? Are they properly following procedures under local and state law? So that's why I was saying earlier, it's a deep dive. It's a very deep dive into their operations and not only kind of the financial side through the audit, but tracking all of their activities, if they have the right point of sale system, et cetera. So it is a very thorough investigation that HDL does on their site inspections. And when you combine that with the audit, it is a very, like I said, a very deep dive into their businesses.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's unannounced, right? So they don't get a lot of preparation time for this audit.
We actually, with those, we coordinate with the site inspections and with the audits. That's something we'll coordinate with them. But
Okay,
what we do, what we'll instill through our code compliance officers and hopefully in cooperation with the sheriff's department is we're not going to be strangers to these folks. We're going to drop in. We're going to make sure that we're going to work with our code compliance officers so that there's a lot of the visible things that are easy to detect about whether or not they're following business practices. Name badges, how the product's displayed, et cetera. Just going to stop in and say hello and unannounced. And if we find any issues, what that will do for us is that'll trigger additional site inspections that are the thorough site inspections if we find any issues there. And we're going to be ready and poised to respond to any complaints that we get from the public about operations that are incorrect.
That's very helpful. I think, Measure H passed, right? We're going to have these cannabis dispensaries, but I think it would be really, really good for the city and what we control through HDL's contract and also through Sheriff's Department partnership and our own code enforcement, just have a very comprehensive plan, particularly in the first few years of operation. Because if we are lax, they will be lax. That's just a given, right? I think we can point to many cities where that's happened. So I just encourage us all to have that plan and maybe at some point bring it back to discuss further. Thanks, that's it.
And I want to follow up on her comments, which were spot on. I think that the kind of the three-prong approach that she summarized with the HDL services that are described in this staff report, code enforcement and law enforcement is critical. And I don't think we've ever had a detailed, org chart kind of explanation of how that's going to work, and I don't know that we necessarily need that. We may not want to talk a whole lot about it, but in the meantime, I think it's important that we have a good grasp on the costs involved in these things, and specifically, I see HDL as being kind of like ESCO, which is a contract agency that does our plan checks, and so we use that HDL resource for these very specific things. But as you mentioned, this is a business type that's going to be in our city for a long time, unless somebody's going to circulate a petition to have another vote on whether we should allow these or not. They're here. So we need to kind of hunker down and figure out what the best way to ensure that we have businesses that are complying with the law and that they're operating in a safe fashion. And an analog experience would be the challenges that we faced 10 years ago when alcohol consumption, the behavior associated with alcohol consumption was out of control in downtown. And we ended up, we worked to address that in conventional ways. Eventually we adopted a deemed approved ordinance, which had a little bit more of the stick, and things settled down a bit. We still have our challenges, but I think they settled down a bit. And so, again, I think it's important that we have a good, our presence is strong when it comes to making sure that these operators are operating according to the rules. I get there are plenty of people who think those rules suck, and but they're there. The voters approve them, both locally and at the state level, and so our obligation is to do our best to enforce them. So I appreciate the work that you guys are all putting in to make that happen, and I would encourage the city manager to bring back to the council recommendations for, making sure we have a good, solid code enforcement team that's working to visit these businesses regularly. Councilmember Lyons, did you want to make a motion?
Yes, I did. And I'd like to move the recommended action. I do want to modify item number 3, which is in relationship to the SB 1186, into changing it to allowing one non-storefront medicinal cannabis delivery. And the reason I want to do that is so that's a matter of public record for anyone reading the action from the public who might be interested in this, so they will be clear that that's what we're moving forward.
I'll second too.
Motion carries unanimously with Councilmember Hensy absent.
Okay, thank you to all who came out to speak, and to staff who I know has been putting in a lot of effort. So I would like to ask for a 5-minute break before we get into this next item, so we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Stretch the legs.
That's how I would end, because you don't say, that's not. No, it would just be 3. Because this one comes out, because you don't, the action is not, they already received it, so. Yeah, so then like right here, you have your quote, this would come up, and then it
A lot
would
of
say
times.
to allow one, because you're gonna say initiate amendments to allow
So my brother's got my mom. It's just a small break.
I thought you were multitasking. Last item, I don't even remember.
Yep.
Oh, athletic fields. Oh, that's right.
Thanks, you guys. That was good. So nice. It's a little more nice. And I was a little surprised.
Municipal code, is this an actual real hard copy with municipal code? Up to date? No,
It should be up to date. It's supposed to be up to date.
Let's look at the book. Well, it's a.
Municipal
No, you're supposed to
code.
put it on the chair so the mayor can sit up.
Yeah,
3 inches higher.
exactly. Feel as,
This is for shorter council members.
yes. Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm not.
Attorney or city manager. So if the team would
Oh, we
take
need
over
them.
on item 10D, a consideration of new athletic field use and allocation policy.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council members. We are going to give you a brief presentation regarding the draft athletic use and allocation policy. And the goal of this policy is to ensure responsible use, utilization, and preservation of the city's athletic fields. The background is that the last policy was developed in 2004 and approved by the department director. Under that policy, they used a guide of the Sports Coalition on Recreation Excellence that had a criteria for recreation use only, as well as 70% residency required. So currently, these requirements and guidelines are no longer accurate or useful, as well as the different fields and hours of operations have all changed. So we're here tonight to propose this draft policy. Additional background is that last year, May through August, the Parks and Recreation Commission organized an ad hoc committee, and they reviewed the current policy as well as surrounding communities to find out what other cities were doing for allocation policies. During that time, they made recommendations, brought it back to city staff, and we then formulated a draft and met with all the youth sports groups one-on-one and gave them the time to review, discuss, and air out any concerns or questions that they had. And when they all agreed that that it was a good change and a good way to move forward, we took the draft policy to our Parks and Recreation Commission on September 19th and asked them to make the recommendation to bring it to you, the city council members. Quick policy highlights is that we took that score criteria and removed that and replaced it with priority group 2 and 3. This follows the standards of our other indoor applications and policies that we have throughout the city. We added disciplinary actions for policy violations, such as sharing fields or leaving lights on after use. We also updated the process for obtaining and maintaining permits, including cancellations. Fields and hours available are permitting updated, as well as the process for unused permitted fields, and the new city council approved per player fees that you all voted on last year, which will become effective July 1st this year. For a quick review of those categories, the group 1 is always the city's programs. Group 2 will be resident youth recreational sports nonprofit, non-competitive. And as you can see, we broke down that residency formula since some of our regular groups with historical use don't fall into that 70%. So we made sure they were still in group 2, but maybe not as high of a priority for the higher percentages. Group 3 are the resident youth competitive sports nonprofit. So we separated these two categories, which is very important as far as field use. The violations that we added on, which we found to be extremely important based on community feedback and complaints. The first violation is a verbal or written warning to the user group and restitution if applicable. The second violation is a verbal and written notice of 3 to 7 day suspension of allocated field dates and restitution for damages if applicable. And that third violation, the more serious, is the verbal and written notice of termination of any existing permits, loss of future rental allocation privileges, and as well as that restitution for damages if applicable. Violation examples, they're very wide and listed in that draft policy, but a few of the highlights are the lights on at, this one is Cardiff Sports Park. We find that our neighbors and residents are very unhappy about it. They reported on my Encinitas app and they sent it to us, and we like to respond and be able to stop this misuse. We've also had sports groups leave their equipment behind on the fields after they're done using them, and often in this particular case, this is our park supervisor who took this photo. They damage the irrigation system, which then harms the fields and able to keep the maintaining of the turf. Another example is unlocked gate. We have a smaller field for Little League at Ecke Sports Park. If that is unlocked, we have found that club or visiting groups or older athletes, if they go into that park, they can hit that ball out of the field, and it can create a risk and danger to the people around or other people using fields. So we have an agreement with them to keep that locked. And again, this is a photo from our park supervisor who came upon it. The gate was left unlocked. So we immediately respond to our groups when we find these incidences, but we really need to have some action on tampering and improving the action. So this evening, our recommendation is to approve the draft athletic field use and allocation policy to ensure the use, utilization, and preservation of the fields, as well as the safety of our youth athletes, and enhancing the community for the neighbors and the environment who are around these athletic fields. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Councilmember Ehlers.
Yeah, question of clarification on your strikes. Is that per year, per inning, per,
Good question. It is per year, and it's a rolling year, so it's based on when they were first notified. So after they hit that cycle for the full year, it will roll into another year.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
Yeah, I'm tacking on to that question. So if they get to the 3 strikes, then they're out. Do they have to wait? Like, what if they want to reapply? Is there a waiting period before they can get back in? Is it forever? How will we handle that? Hopefully we don't have anybody that gets to 3 strikes, but.
we agree that hopefully that does not happen, but it would be based on the next allocation period. So there's 2 allocation periods throughout the year. It's every 6 months. So they would then have that opportunity. And definitely we would be expecting, the reasons why and the justifications and some proof of good standing of how they would remedy these challenges from happening. We often hear that they're volunteers. And so we offer to help with their volunteers and help with that education and understanding and knowing. But as I believe you're all aware, it is the impact that we have on our neighbors in the community next to these fields that we're also trying to represent.
Great, that makes sense. And you did mention, we heard a lot about the fees when that came before council, and we heard a lot from the youth groups about that. But you met with the youth groups about these changes to the overall policy and got pretty good feedback, is what I understand, right?
Yes, we did. And the main reason is because many of them did not qualify for the score category. So something had to be repaired either way. And that's why I believe they were all fairly happy with the changes. And as we heard in the fee meeting about people sharing fields, groups doing some of these actions that we know are unsafe, they realize that they've been doing those things and they want to do better as well. They care and prioritize the youth athletes.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Lyons.
Just a question having to do with just clarifying something for me. I do get a lot of calls for the Cardiff Sports Park lights being left on. So is it usually a case of they're left on after a team has been there? Or is there some sort of automatic timer that turns them on when it's anticipated the team will be there? Could you explain that?
Yes, the city uses a must-go lighting system, and it is digital. So when someone applies for a permit and they ask for the lights, let's say it's till 10 p.m., it is scheduled to be till 10 p.m., and those lights will go off per the must-go schedule. We do provide an 800 number to all the youth sports groups. So if they finish at 9 p.m. or 8:30, let's say, they have an 800 number that they can call and are expected to call to turn those lights off. Let's say they cancel their meeting because the coach is sick and something happened, they are expected to call that 800 number and have those lights turned off. So when we meet with the groups, and because we have one liaison for each sports group, they will tell us their volunteer coaches they're not following through for us, and we have said we will talk to them if we need to. This is vital and extremely important because of the impact on the neighborhoods. They do not appreciate lights left on. We also have a field ambassador program, so we do send staff, not every night, but as much as possible, to check on the fields, so that they're being properly used, the fields are not being shared, and that those lights are going off when expected and scheduled.
Thank you, and I'm so happy to see this policy. With that, I'll move approval of recommended action.
Councilmember Ayers.
One more clarification question on the priority. You had the category 1, 2, 3, 4. How does the prioritization of availability of, because there's always a shortage of fields. How does it get allocated within those categories 1, 2, 3, 4, and within your priority list where you went from, mostly Encinitas residents down to less than 40? Does it fill 1 first, then 2, then 3, or is first come, first serve, or how do you do that?
Well, so currently the advantage that all the current youth groups have is that we also base it on historical history. So like who had this Ecke field previously will be prioritized, and that is part of this policy that historical space holds as well. That percentage of residency would be if there was a new group that was coming in that would then slate what their priority would be. But currently the historical placement is what we stand up to.
Okay, so when the new group comes in and they have one of those category 3 or 2, let's say, and they're high in the number of Encinitas residents, does that give them the ability to, who are they competing with if the historical is already there? I'm just trying to understand the mechanics and what the categories and the priorities within the categories really mean.
Okay, so well, currently, if there's no space. So if a new group were to come forward at this point, we would tell them that we don't have any space. But let's say there was, they would not bump an existing group because they had higher residents than an existing group, they would not bump them. If we had 2 new groups, let's say, and we had the field space, we would then say, who has the highest level of residency? If someone had 70 plus, they would get priority over the one that had lower.
Oh, and does category 2, if they both have the same residency, does category 2 have a higher priority than a category 1? You had priority 1, 2, 3 in each of those.
Yes.
And so if you have them both with the same priority level within category 2 and 3, and they both come in as new groups, does 2 then take would be awarded the field?
Yes, Group 2 is priority because it's recreational use. Group 3 is competitive. And we want to make sure the fields are primarily for recreational use.
And then last question, if you have 2 and 3 and the category 2 group is priority 3 and the category 3 group is priority 2, I assume the priority 2 would jump to the top even though they're, because they have less residents. Is that how that works?
The Group 2 will always be a priority over Group 3.
Okay.
Not taking residency into account. The only time we will take residency into account is if they're in that same group.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And a couple comments. I appreciate this proposal and seconded Deputy Councilmember Lyons' motion. I know that a few months ago we looked at fees, and this was a concern, and there was a proposal to use monetary tools to try and gain compliance, and I appreciate this approach a little better. It goes to that issue that I was talking about where eventually we adopted deemed approved, and maybe at some point we go back to the monetary. And maybe as we see this in effect for a year, we find out that if there is somebody that gets to 3 strikes, maybe the solution to get them back in good graces is to be able to pay for the expenses associated with whatever they have done. In cases like this, with so much of the field use with youth, I'm concerned a little bit about the impacts of adult decisions or adult irresponsibility or whatever, however you want to categorize it, affecting the opportunities for youth and their use of the fields and their activities, which I think are very important. So I think this is a reasonable proposal and that it is worth giving it a try. I also want to thank Mr. Berry, who is a Cardiff resident, and I see his name frequently in the report of the My Encinitas app. He is frequently notifying the city when people aren't doing what they're supposed to do and turn off the lights. So thank him. I know there are others in the city that have been helpful to eyes of the city, and so I appreciate that. These are important resources that are paid for with taxpayer dollars for the most part, so thank you for that. Finally, the Pop Warner organization, La Costa Canyon Pop Warner, used to be San Diego Pop Warner, and it is in fact an organization that has a large area of young people that it serves, and so they end up with a lower percentage of Encinitas residents in their program. So that aspect of this, the historic, is important, so my hope is that the way we approach this isn't going to affect them in a negative way. They, I think, are providing also a very useful service, and little leagues and softball leagues have traditionally been restricted by geographic boundaries that are in just one jurisdiction. So with that, I see no more requests to speak, and unless one of the sheriff deputies wants to comment, we have no one else out in the audience, so we can vote.
Motion carries unanimously with Councilmember Hensy absent.
Okay, thank you. So that is all of the city's business that we are conducting here today. There are some administrative affairs that we need to take care of, which is reports pursuant to AB 1234.
I have nothing to report.
What, we had a, Joy and I were at a Encina Wastewater Authority, so we attended that today, and.
Nothing that much to report on
Nothing
it.
to report, thank you, yeah.
Nothing to report.
I attended a Transportation Committee meeting at Sandag, and there was no exciting news out of that. City Manager report. No report. City Attorney report.
Very briefly, I just wanted to let the council know, as I'm sure many of you are aware, that the Supreme Court's decision, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision in the Grants Pass case has been granted certiorari by the Supreme Court. My office will be filing briefs on behalf of Cal sheriffs, Cal chiefs, as well as a number of other cities. The deadline to file amicus briefs is in approximately 45 days.
Okay, very good. I'd love to see that when it was done.
Absolutely.
Thank you. City Clerk reports.
Just one last time, we are accepting applications for boards and commissions. The deadline is tomorrow at 5 o'clock.
So for those people who are last-minute guys like me, you better get on that computer
That's
and
right.
get that application filled out if you want to serve.
Applications have been started. Get in there and finish them.
Okay, very good. And if Karen has a picture, I would like to adjourn tonight's meeting by sharing a photo and adjourn this meeting in honor of the city's poet laureate. This is a picture of Trish, and as you may recognize, Kevin is above. Trish Duger, the city's poet laureate, is in the chair. Her son is behind her. Her daughter, her granddaughter, and her great-granddaughter are there. She passed away recently, and so I will read to you the message I got from him the day after we presented her with that honor of being the official Encinitas Poet Laureate. Hi, Tony. I wanted to thank you again. Last night was really special. I'm so glad Mimi was here to be a part of it. That's his daughter. They are staying with us through Christmas. You nailed it with the poems you chose to share. Still laughing about the chipper. What an imagination Mom has. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And in adjournment, I would like to read a poem of hers called Spare Parts. We barge out of the womb with two of them, eyes, ears, arms, hands, legs, feet. Only one heart. Not a good plan. God should know we need at least a dozen, a baker's dozen of hearts. They break like Easter eggs, hidden in the grass, stepped on and smashed. My own heart is patched, bandaged, taped, barely the same shape it once was when it beat fast for you. And in honor of the Encinitas Poet Laureate, Trish Duggar, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all for your patience with our technical difficulties.